Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for your time. I know it's after lunch and everybody's a bit tired. So my name is Anand Stephen, and thank you, Rose, for that introduction. I'm with Gannett Fleming. We are primarily in the U.S., and we do everything from roadway infrastructure, architecture work, and I'm in the roadway business line. So today, what I'm going to be talking more about is how to develop to upskill and cross-skill our colleagues and move them towards enabling various digital technologies and building efficiencies as a result. Um, One thing is there that for any digital transformation or any change, we as humans are creatures of habit. We like to do things the same way. But as we know, for any technological change, it's angst producing. We're constantly worried about the change, how it's going to impact our life, and so something as if it's in our role where we should be attentive to how people are reacting to this change. But before I go into this presentation, I wanted to share a lesson I learned from one of my early mentors. In fact, it was my mentor's mentor, and it was not an engineering or a technical lesson, but it was a lesson more on how listening and being empathetic to the users will ultimately result in a better engineering product. So this mentor is like an archetypical engineer. He was an engineer's engineer, and this was back in the US, and he got an assignment to design basically the best routing plan for garbage delivery in the Caribbean. So he sat down with the local municipality and designed the best thing from the best algorithms possible and laid it out, had all these instructions. He met with the garbage operators as well. First round, it went round, it failed. It was taking too much time. The local residents were unhappy with it. He comes back again, goes back to the drawing board, refines it with all these algorithms, looks at it from a different angle. It doesn't work. Then he sits with the operators and he communicates with them. He gets all the calculations from them, appropriate tonnage and so on and so forth. It still fails. So he was totally confused, and he talked to these operators, the phenomenally intelligent people. They were articulating their needs. All the equations were correct. It wasn't working. And finally, then he decided to sit with them and experience the truck route and the instructions they had with them. And it turns out that unfortunately, most of them didn't have formal education, even though they were experts at moving this garbage around, calculating the tonnage, so they couldn't read detailed instructions. So the lesson he was trying to teach me was that, it's not enough to be just sympathetic. That is, looking at the problem from the other's point of view. We essentially have to be empathetic to understand and be in the shoes of the end user, not just the end user, but also like the people who are delivering, the intermediary people. So that's the lesson I took forward with me, and so going back to Dwayne's example, what he did is once he realized these detailed written instructions were not working, he went back to the drawing board, and essentially it was a minor change in the instruction. It was just changing and making it kind of like a precursor to the IKEA instruction manual, and then the project became more successful in terms of that. So he, by one of these earlier mentors, Dwayne, putting himself in the shoes of these operators, he was able to understand why they functioned a certain way, and that truly brought about the change on ground. So that's the kind of the story I wanted to lead off with, and kind of share the experience, what kind of governs or kind of inspires me in my daily life to work with my colleagues. So what really is this empathetic environment? Basically, it kind of goes back to the example, we have to listen to our colleagues and see what their concerns are, why necessarily. It's not that they don't want to do it maybe, but they have some other concern. Maybe it's a concern about it being too fast or redundant or inaccuracies, things like that. At the root of this, whenever we're talking about any BIM change or digital delivery change, it's a paradigm shift. We have to do two things, right? We have to reorient our theoretical, change our theoretical understanding and reorient our practice. So to that end, we have to see how best we can adjust various educational frameworks and tools that are available to us, and also where our colleagues might be regionally and also in terms of their skill levels. So one thing we see in many, many management textbooks is this I don't know if it's very clear, but basically this is a progression of human emotions that is derived from this anthropologist study on change. And basically her study was how when dealing with death based. So it kind of followed that progression. And that's what was kind of applied over, it kind of found its way in the corporate world and any change management. But in reality, we are not so compartmentalized as human beings, right? We don't go everybody doesn't go through the same steps. So at this point, I said, okay, let me put my sociologist hat and look at it from how people are actually reacting to change. So what I did is, you talk to people, see what their perspectives are, and then each of the different change adopters didn't necessarily go through the same cycle that Kubler-Ross predicted. It was different for different people. What that meant to us was that we could adapt various learning resources to how they moved along. So this is kind of a change adopter. It's a composite figure of a person, and you can see that these are a couple of examples that I go through. Each one experienced change a little differently. And you can, being a typical engineer, I had to put it in a chart, and you can see that each one has a different pathway in how they experienced change. And being attentive to that helps us give them the appropriate learning resources. It helps us retain talent and also spread the knowledge within the organization or community much faster. So these are just simple graphs kind of showing you that, it's not necessarily that as soon as we say we're going to change. Some people are met with excitement. That might be a lot of people in this at this conference that are excited. But then people go through that. Ultimately, we'd like to get to a place where there's more acceptance of, be it our standards or our technology or process. Some people just kind of start with acceptance and then actually go through the whole process that, okay, we go to negotiate a bit, what's our appropriate standard. So now that we have this, right, so we can go back to the classical, there's three, basically the most educational frameworks fit into these three classical approaches. Either they are very top-down or they're repetitive through behavioral tendencies. So having this, what does it help? It helps us to understand what skills are necessary for people to acquire and what tools are there. Because it's not necessary that the same task, two people will learn the same way. However, there are certain tasks that are necessary that it has to be like a show and tell collaborative mechanism. For in our case, like a CDE, there is no other way other than collaboration. So it has to be, it will fall in the third category. We have to do it together. There's no other way around it. So by doing a combination of that, of understanding where your colleagues are and where the particular task might fall best into the educational approach, you can ultimately go to a kind of develop something like an implementation for your skills matrix. You can see what resources are available to which group or a group of individuals, and then map them accordingly. So this kind of shortens your learning curve a little bit, and also it helps people adapt much faster to change, which, as we all know, is accelerating and moving at a dramatic pace. So um, I just want, maybe if you can see that, I let that sit for a little bit, and you can see how when you're starting from listening to people, knowing what tools are available, what types of learning is necessary, through that we can eventually develop something that's actionable, and we can provide our colleagues and ourselves how we can move to the next step and accelerate change. So this is just basically a table format of that, just showing you. If I go back here, uh, I just mapped it out in terms of reward and effort, and this is kind of a little bit more practical because we don't have typically infinite amount of time to implement something. We have to learn as the project is being executed often. So that's the kind of a game plan we can have to upskill. This is a simple example of, like, for a practical technical implementation, what we need to do, some of the things that are concepts that we need to take into account. One thing that I'm really, really passionate about is to democratize innovation. Often what happens is that we tend to glorify innovation as if it is some mythical activity, or this innovator is from fallen from the sky. If we can make it like an everyday practice, like what I think of as a big I innovation and then a small I innovation, it goes a long way in changing not just an adoption of new technologies, but changing our culture and spreading knowledge. One theme that I've heard since this morning was, we all talked about how people are actually hoarding information or holding on to the knowledge they have. But if we can slowly kind of minimize not saying it's not important, but kind of not glorify it so much, nor villainize it so much, so that might help, because even through history, like even the great innovators, many of them were killed, or like by the time the invention was taken into account, after the fact we glorify them. So that's kind of one thing can help. I feel not only with the culture of the organization or the community in which we are developing these technologies, but also I think at the end there's this tendency to hoard information or have data in your silos. It'll go away because it becomes more open. Again, how to kind of go about this process, the way I think of it is, as if there's two parts to it. We need to listen to others and understand from where they're coming. And not necessarily that we accept everything, because the acceptance and the decision should be based on facts and research. But it's important to understand different perspectives, like as partners, as colleagues. And then the thing that kind of fits is to just kind of go back to being a kid and learn shamelessly, really. So I think if we can kind of combine those two, it'll slowly breed more innovation, not necessarily like earth-shattering stuff, but something that's more practical and that's more everyday kind of deal. So I can. So I go back to this a little bit. Here, this slide here. The reason I put this up is that it's kind of a practical implementation of, at the end result, how to get going. You can replace it with whatever skills are necessary for your project. So you're kind of mapping your task to your person and the type of learning they have. So some of them obviously are like high reward, low effort. Just go ahead with it and do it. It's the first thing you need to take on your project, and also it's going to upskill and change the culture a little bit as well, because people have started getting more familiar with the technologies that are needed. So that's